Sometimes the places that look the most peaceful are the ones planning your downfall. I learned that the hard way, somewhere along the forgotten backroads of America, where the streetlights give up after dusk and the locals don't bother locking their doors, not because they feel safe, but because nothing outside wants to come in. My name is Evan Cole. I'm 37 years old, and I've been living full-time in my Class C RV for 2 years. At first, the open road meant freedom, fresh air, quiet campgrounds, the comfort of solitude. But there's a different kind of silence these places hold, a silence that listens back. I always tell people traveling the country isn't dangerous because of animals, breakdowns, or getting stuck in the weather. No, the danger starts when you're outnumbered by the unknown. It lurks in the eyes of strangers who stare too long, in the houses where curtains twitch when you walk by, in the forests that know your real name. There are towns we were never meant to stop in, towns that smile wide but never mean it. The first time I realized that, I was 2 months into the lifestyle, still new to the idea of calling the highway home. I'd left the noise of Portland behind, heading southeast with no real destination, just driving until the scenery felt right. Eventually, I stumbled across a little desert town in Nevada that wasn't on any of my apps, not on any atlas, at least not the ones updated in the last century. The sign at the turnout said, "Welcome to Resting Rock, a quiet place to recover." The name sounds wholesome until you dwell on it. The place looked like a mirage of the Old West. One gas pump, a brick diner with a flickering neon sign, a few houses slouched under the weight of time. And beyond that, empty desert, stretching farther than I cared to imagine. But the sun was dropping, my tank was low, and there was a dusty RV park behind the diner with a hand-painted sign reading $10 a night, cash only. Cheap things are rarely safe, but I was still inexperienced enough to think I was just lucky. The gravel crunched under my tires as I pulled in. There was no office, just a box nailed to a pole where you were supposed to drop your money. Nobody watching, nobody greeting me, nobody saying a word. The air smelled like old copper and sunburned plastic, like decay left too long in the heat. A stray dog wandered past me, ribs showing, but it never looked up. It just sniffed the ground, tail rigid, like it was making sure the earth didn't move beneath it. As the sky turned a bruised purple, I stepped out to stretch my legs. That's when I saw them. 3 people standing at the far end of the RV park near a row of crumbling trailers. They weren't talking. They weren't moving. They were just staring. I raised my hand in a half wave, and for a long moment, none of them reacted. Then slowly, all 3 lifted their arms in unison. It wasn't a wave back. It was more like a gesture of acknowledgement or permission. I laughed awkwardly, gave a nod, and climbed back inside. I told myself small towns are quirky, that maybe they were curious about the newcomer. But truth is, my instincts were screaming. A lifetime of city living might ruin a person, but it sharpens their danger radar. Darkness came fast. I closed the blinds and tried to keep busy, making a small dinner, adjusting the leveling blocks, but I couldn't shake the tension that wrapped itself around my chest. Every so often, I checked the window. Those 3 people were still standing there. No talking, no leaving. Just locked onto me like I'd already done something wrong. That's when I heard it, a light tapping on my RV door. Not a knock. A tap, soft, controlled, someone testing the surface. I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. Another tap, then 3 more. Rhythm like a heartbeat. I approached the door, keeping quiet, listening. A woman's voice drifted through, brittle and dry. "Sir, you didn't pay." My stomach dropped. I had completely forgotten about the fee box. Maybe this was all just a misunderstanding. I grabbed a $20, wanting to keep things friendly, and opened the door just a crack. No one was there. The night was empty, silent, still. But the 3 figures were suddenly closer, 15 feet away, their faces pale and slack under the weak streetlight. Eyes open wider than should be possible, like their eyelids didn't know when to stop. Their clothes didn't fit right, sleeves too short, pants too long, like they were wearing someone else's life. The woman, the one I thought I heard, tilted her head, and without moving her lips, I heard her voice again. "You should pay. It's the rule." The words came not from her mouth, but from the dark behind my RV. I slammed the door shut and locked every latch I had. My breaths turned sharp. My heart punched the inside of my ribs. I staggered backward, blinds snapping shut as I turned. Tap, 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 tap. This time, tapping on the back window. A silhouette pressed against the glass, fingers dragging slowly down. I grabbed my flashlight, like that thin beam could keep evil away, and yelled that I would pay in the morning, that I just needed sleep. The tapping stopped. Silence reclaimed the night. For a moment, I thought maybe I had passed whatever test they were giving me. Then came the whisper, right behind my ear. Morning never comes to those who stay. I spun around, but the RV was empty. Too empty. The kind of empty that makes you question the space around you, whether it might collapse inward. I heard footsteps now, outside, circling the rig, slow and measured. Desert wind lifted the gravel, tapping it against the metal. The temperature dropped so fast it hurt to breathe. I could see my own breath spilling from my mouth, like the RV itself was freezing from the outside in. That's when the lights flickered. Once, twice, then went black. Standing in the dark, I pressed my back against the cabinet, flashlight trembling in my hand. I tried to force logic into the situation. Tell myself these were just weird locals, just an off-kilter town. But logic doesn't whisper your thoughts out loud. "You're scared," the woman's voice drifted through the walls. "Good. Fear keeps us hungry." Something pressed against the side of the RV, hard enough to make it tilt. The entire vehicle groaned like it was being shoved toward the deep part of the dark desert. I wasn't waiting to see what they wanted. I dove for the driver's seat, jammed the key, and the engine screamed awake. Gravel flew as I tore out of that lot, straight down the road I'd come from. I didn't care about headlights or street signs, just escape. I checked my mirrors once and wished I hadn't. They were running after me, not sprinting, gliding, feet not touching the ground, white eyes wide and hungry, and that damned whisper kept up. "You didn't pay." The moment I reached the highway, my radio blasted full volume with static and one clear phrase breaking through: toll unpaid, debt outstanding. It took 60 miles for the static to fade. It took days for the shaking in my hands to stop, and it took months before I accepted that some towns aren't on maps for a reason. That was only my first encounter, and I was stupid enough to keep driving. I told myself Resting Rock was a fluke, just some strange desert nightmare that I'd driven too far into. A warning, maybe, but I didn't listen to warnings back then. Maybe I still don't. I figured if I kept driving, stuck to more familiar roads, I'd regain that feeling of freedom. That's what the open road promises you, that every mile puts distance between you and your past. But what if your past decides it isn't done with you? After Nevada, I set my route toward Colorado, not through the big cities, I avoided those now, but through the smaller places with promise. Sanctuary Ridge sounded perfect. A quiet Colorado mountain town, peaceful and picturesque. A place where, according to the reviews, people still look out for each other. That should have been comforting, but the longer I drove, the darker that phrase felt. The GPS guided me through winding roads lined with towering pines. The snow gathered in the shadows, even though the roads were clear. I rolled the windows down, hoping fresh air would settle my nerves, but something felt off. The trees leaned a little too close. The wind carried whispers instead of howls. My phone flickered into airplane mode on its own. Sanctuary Ridge appeared like a snapshot, the kind of tourist-perfect town that belongs on postcards. Main Street, a bakery, a tiny grocery, a volunteer fire station, and behind it all, a campground tucked into the woods, maintained by the town. Just one night, I murmured to myself, gripping the wheel a little too tight. A wooden sign greeted me at the RV park entrance. Sanctuary Ridge Campground. Visitors welcome. Stay together. Stay together? I was alone. I should have taken that as a sign. The campground host looked like she stepped out of a 1950s advertisement. Bright red lipstick, hair curled just right, apron tied tight around her waist. But her smile, it was stretched too long, like a painted-on expression that would peel if she moved too fast. Her eyes reflected none of that warmth. "Oh my, a traveler," she said, voice soft but tired. "We don't get many who come alone. You'll want lot 12. Closer to the others." "The others?" I asked. She nodded, gaze drifting toward the deeper rows of RVs, identical trailers, all perfectly aligned, curtains drawn, no movement. It felt like looking at a neighborhood built for ghosts. "We stick close here," she explained. "The woods, they don't like when we spread out." Before I could misinterpret that any further, she slipped a laminated pamphlet into my hand. Rules. There were 12 of them. And right at the top, bolded, "No one remains outside after dark. No exceptions." I half chuckled, trying to lighten the atmosphere. "Bears? Mountain lions?" She smiled too quickly. "Sure, bears." Lot 12 had a picnic table, a fire ring, and an old lantern hanging from a shepherd's hook. Someone had taken time to keep the place tidy, but the stillness was unnerving. Even the birds kept their distance. As sunset bled through the pine branches, I noticed something odd. All the lanterns in the campground flicked on at once. Not solar lights, not motion sensors. Gas lanterns, ignited by something unseen. I watched as silhouettes appeared inside the windows of the other trailers, one in each, perfectly still, perfectly centered, like they were assigned to watch. The rule pamphlet felt heavier I didn't want to see what happened after dark, so I locked up early, made a quick meal, and tried to tell myself that keeping to the rules was just part of respecting small communities. But lying in bed, every noise felt amplified. The crack of a tree limb, the scuttle of something in the brush, the whispering wind threading itself between the RVs. That's when the lantern outside my window flickered violently, and something tapped the task. Tap. Slow. Deliberate. Like a reminder. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. The tap repeated a little harder this time. Then came a man's voice. Muffled, panicked, breaking at the edges. "Let me in. Please, let me in. They're coming." I shot upright. The voice sounded human, fear-soaked, desperate. Against every instinct screaming at me, I peeked through the blinds. A man stood there. His face bled with tears, his clothes torn. He kept glancing over his shoulder. When he saw movement in my window, he pressed his hand flat to the glass. "You're awake," he whispered. "You need to open the..." His sentence dissolved into a gasp as his body jerked backward, yanked into the shadows by something I didn't see. He didn't scream again. The woods swallowed him whole. I clamped a hand over my mouth, heart battering my ribs, and then, one by one, the silhouettes in the other trailers turned their heads toward me. Not the bodies, just their heads in perfect, unnatural unison. A soft voice drifted from the trees, calm as a lullaby. "You're alone. That makes you pray." Branches snapped. Footsteps approached, not one set, many. Dozens. Closing in. I backed away from the window and grabbed my keys. I wasn't repeating Nevada. Not again. But before I could even throw the RV into drive, every lantern outside burned brighter, lighting up the woods like a spotlight. For the first time, I saw the figures rushing between the trees, pale limbs bending at wrong angles, faces warped with hunger and exhilaration. They moved like they had never been taught to walk properly, fast, unpredictable, instinctual. A voice cut through the chaos, the campground host shouting from somewhere in the dark, "Stay inside. You broke the rule." A heavy slam rocked my RV, then another. Claws, hands, I couldn't tell, but something wanted in. The radio crackled to life, static erupting like a scream. Words emerged beneath it. "You're alone, alone, alone." The RV shook harder. A window cracked, just a hairline fracture, but enough to let the cold press its fingers through. My breath frosted instantly. The air smelled like soil freshly turned over a grave. Then, something amazing. A horn echoed through the trees. Loud, commanding, the kind of sound that stops every predator in its tracks. The pounding stopped. The silhouettes froze. That horn blew again, longer this time. The creatures retreated into the woods like the darkness had reeled them back on a leash. A flashlight beam hit my windshield. The host sprinted toward me, panic ripping through her once perfect facade. "Go," she yelled. "They know you don't belong. If you stay..." They'll keep you. I didn't need more convincing. I accelerated so hard the tires spat mud. The host screamed something else, but the wind stole it before I could hear. I kept going until the road straightened and the town lights fell away. Only then did I pull over, lungs burning, trying to steady my shaking hands. I unfolded the rule pamphlet. There were 12 rules. I'd been so focused on the first one, I'd missed the last. 12. Anyone alone at night will be claimed by the forest. That entire town clung to survival by one fragile thread, togetherness. And I had shown up alone, the perfect offering. The forest had almost taken me. 2 encounters, 2 escapes. And for the first time, I realized this wasn't coincidence. Something was leading me to these places. Something that wanted me alone. By the time I reached Kansas, I wasn't driving for the views anymore. I was driving to outrun patterns. Patterns I didn't understand, but couldn't ignore. 2 towns. 2 sets of rules. 2 encounters that nearly killed me. I should have stopped. I should have gone home. But the problem with living on the road is you don't have a home to run back to. When all you own moves with you, there's nowhere to hide. I tried convincing myself that what happened in Sanctuary Ridge was just a night gone wrong, maybe a hallucination amplified by fear. But the scratches dented into the side of my RV, those were real. The crack in the back window, real. And at night, when I fought for sleep, I still heard that voice whispering from the trees. You're alone. So when I saw billboards appearing one after another across the flat plains advertising the friendliest town in Kansas, I felt sick. Friendliest. Perfect word to mask something hungry. The name of the place was Hollow Bend. It sat on the edge of a dried-up riverbed, the kind that once shaped life but now only remembers death. I wasn't planning to stop, wasn't planning anything, but my fuel gauge dipped near empty, and a storm approached fast from the west. Lightning split the sky like the earth was being stitched open. The wind pushed against the RV like it wanted to peel me right off the road. Rain came down suddenly, sheets of water blurring everything. I could barely see. So I slowed, hoping Hollow Bend offered shelter long enough for the storm to pass. The main road ushered me directly to the town square. There was a fuel station, but no attendant in sight. Across the street, the windows of every shop glowed warm orange. But I didn't see a single person. The town was alive but deserted. It felt prepared, like it had been expecting me. I spotted a sign pointing toward lodging. Bend and Break RV Court. Your home away from home. I almost kept driving until I noticed a familiar symbol on the office door. A symbol I had seen in both previous towns. 3 circles. Connected. Tangled like chain links. Once is coincidence. Twice is strange. 3 times? 3 times is a pattern that wants to be noticed. Something cold slid through my chest. I kept my motor running. I didn't even bother stepping outside, just rolled the window down and tapped the horn once. After a moment, a man stepped out of the office, mid-50s, wearing overalls, a baseball cap, and a smile that tried too hard. His eyes flicked over the RV like he was inventorying it. You're lucky, he said through the rain. Storm'll trap most travelers on the highway. Happens all the time. Trap. Bad word choice. He motioned me closer, shouting over the thunder. We got 1 space left, right behind the office. Close enough if you need help. Close enough so he could listen. Close enough so I couldn't escape quietly. But the storm shook the air again, and lightning hit somewhere so nearby the ground trembled. I nodded stiffly. Survival sometimes looks like surrender, at least until you find a better way out. I parked where he pointed, right beside the office, right beneath a bright floodlight that hummed like a hungry insect. The moment the engine shut off, everything went silent. No rain hitting the roof, no thunder, no storm. The sky cleared faster than nature would ever allow. My skin prickled. Storms don't just vanish because you've parked. I checked my phone, 2% battery. No service. I shut the blinds, tried to calm down, made coffee just to have warmth in my hands. I told myself I was safe as long as I stayed inside. Locked doors, head down, one night, then gone before sunrise. I kept believing that until I noticed something. There were voices outside, not yelling, not joyful, Whispering, low tones, multiple speakers, too many to count. A congregation forming. I peeked out. The floodlight cast deep shadows against the office wall. The owner stood there with a group of people, maybe a dozen, shoulders hunched close like they were shielding something from the world. Something, or someone. Then the chanting began. Not words, just a steady hum, almost like a generator trying to start, or a heartbeat. I swallowed, pulse drumming against my skull. The owner raised a lantern, the same kind used in Sanctuary Ridge, and motioned toward my RV. Every head turned. Their eyes, reflecting the flame, glowed like molten gold. The owner spoke, barely above the hum. He's the one traveling alone. Not again. I rushed to the driver's seat, but before I could twist the key, the engine refused to turn. It was dead. Not even a click. I tried the lights. Nothing. The battery wasn't drained. Something had cut the power. The hum outside rose in pitch. Faster. Louder. The group stepped closer, moving unnaturally synchronized like they shared one muscle, one mind. Their shadows on my RV stretched long, fingers dragging across the walls like insects hunting for cracks. Then, footsteps on the roof. Heavy, deliberate. Something was above me. The metal dented inward with each step. My breath hitched as the ceiling bowed, dust sprinkling over me. Slow, crawling weight shifted, right above my head. A man's voice, too close. It seeped through the vent like warm breath. Let us make you part of us. I bolted to the back door, shook the handle, jammed the lock, stuck. Whispers crawled beneath the RV. Fingernails scratching at the undercarriage. The tires lowered as the weight increased, as though unseen hands lifted the rig onto unnatural backs. Then the humming stopped. Everything stopped, and a single voice emerged from beneath me. Dry as a desert grave. You were warned. Every memory of Resting Rock and Sanctuary Ridge crashed into me at once. The whisper in the desert. The rules in the woods. This wasn't random. I wasn't unlucky. I was being herded. Each town pulling me deeper into something intelligent. Something ancient. I grabbed the biggest wrench I owned and smashed the emergency exit window, glass exploding outward into the night. I crawled through, cutting my arms on the way out, dropped hard into the mud, and ran. Thunder cracked again. Close. Too close. The storm returned like it had been waiting just beyond the sky's edge. I looked back only once. The entire group stood around my RV, motionless, watching. Then every single light in Hallowbend turned red. It pulsed, once, like a heartbeat. Something inside that town woke up. I didn't wait to see it. I sprinted into the dark countryside, rain washing blood and dirt from my arms. I didn't stop running until my lungs gave out and my legs threatened to collapse. When I finally looked up, exhausted, soaked, breath cutting in and out, the road lay ahead of me. And at the intersection where the town limits should have been, a new sign reflected in my flashlight beam, "You can't run from what you're meant for, Evan." They knew my name. I staggered back, mouth drying into panic. They knew my name. I stumbled onto the asphalt, forcing myself forward, away from that message, away from the truth trying to reach me. 3 towns, 3 escapes, 3 warnings. Something was hunting me, or dragging me somewhere I didn't want to go. I wasn't running from danger anymore. Danger was following me. I didn't want to believe the pattern. My mind fought to preserve any scrap of normalcy I had left. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw golden lantern flames burning through the trees, white eyes gliding over desert dust, red town lights beating like a pulse behind me. I couldn't deny it anymore. Something was guiding me through a twisted tour of America's forgotten nightmares. And if you let fear drive long enough, eventually it takes the wheel. I stayed on the move for days, fueled by cheap coffee and paranoia. Every town on the map looked like a trap. Every empty road felt like a funnel leading me somewhere I wasn't ready to see. I slept only when exhaustion pinned me to the mattress. Even then, sleep wasn't relief. It was replay. Whispers crawling up my spine, hands rattling the RV windows, someone breathing my name. Evan. I heard it in the engine ticks, in the wind slipping past the mirrors, in the silence when the radio cut unnaturally mid-song. It came from anywhere, and from nowhere. By the time I hit Missouri, I was beyond worn down. My body trembled constantly. Adrenaline drained to fumes. eyes bloodshot, thoughts fractured. When I saw the sign for Graveheart, I pulled over just to breathe. At first, I thought the name was some grim tourist gag, but the town wasn't trying to entertain anyone. Wooden buildings stood like bones bleached by the sun, hollow frames leaning into the wind. A lone church steeple pierced the sky. And hanging from the front porch of the general store was a sign swinging lazily. Don't stay the night. A rule laid bare, without charm, without welcome, without hope. For a moment, I felt a twisted comfort. Honesty was refreshing. If a town directly tells you to leave, you listen. But my RV sputtered, coughed, and died right there, rolling to a stop like it had obeyed someone else. I stared at the dead dashboard, pleaded, turned the key again. Nothing. Not even the courtesy of a flicker. Cold dread pooled through me. I wasn't in control anymore. A figure stepped onto the porch of the store, a tall, elderly man with skin stretched thin like wax paper and eyes too dark to show reflection. He didn't smile, didn't wave. He just stared until I reluctantly stepped out of the RV. "You're being chased," he said. His voice was the sound of pages turning in forgotten books. "And they're close." My throat tightened. Who? What is happening to me? He didn't answer. Instead, he pointed a shaky finger toward the horizon where storm clouds gathered unnaturally fast, churning black like oil spreading across the sky. "You have maybe an hour," he muttered. "2 if they're patient." Every town before had been subtle about their knowledge. This man spoke like he'd been waiting for me. I took a step forward. "Please, I don't know what they want." He tilted his head like he was measuring my soul's weight. "They want what they always wanted. They want the ones who crossed the map alone. People without anchors, without witnesses. Unclaimed souls can be rewritten." My stomach twisted. "Why me?" His expression darkened further. "You chose the road alone. Now the road has chosen you." That's when the church bell rang, a single trembling toll cutting through the air like a blade. The man's head snapped toward it. "It's begun," he whispered. "Go. Get inside. Anywhere. Doors locked. Lights out. No noise. If they think you've already been taken, they may keep moving." I bolted to the RV, fumbling with the handle even though I knew it wouldn't protect me. As I climbed in, the wind hit Graveheart like a force of nature enraged. Dirt whipping into spirals, windows rattling, the church bell swinging harder, though no one pulled its rope. The man from the porch was gone. Thunder boomed. The sky cracked open, not with lightning, but with screams. Not human screams. Metallic, layered, like radios tuned to forgotten frequencies, broadcasting agony. Every instinct screamed at me to look away. But I looked. Where the storm touched the ground, figures emerged, tall silhouettes stretching thin into the wind as if carved from darkness itself. They glided closer, their bodies flickering like bad reception, their heads tilted back, mouths opening into voids that pulled the air inward, suffocating sound. The RV shook violently. They were coming. I dropped flat behind the couch, heart convulsing in my chest. I clamped my hand over my mouth, trying not to breathe too loud. The windows darkened as shadows passed. The metal walls groaned under the pressure of their grip. Not fists, not hands, but something that wrapped around the entire vehicle like a web tightening. One voice slithered through the vents, low, knowing, certain. "You have run long enough." Another answered, "You belong to us." Every vein in my body iced over. The air thickened, filling with a static that made my teeth ache. My vision blurred around the edges as if the world was closing in, compressing into a single point of fear. Then, pounding, hard, repetitive, above, below, all sides. They weren't just trying to enter, they were trying to crush the RV flat. A window shattered, glass spraying the floor. A long black limb twisted through the opening, smooth as polished stone, groping, searching for a heartbeat. I scrambled backward on my hands, feet slipping. The limb slammed against the floor, inches from my leg. The ground quaked as more pressed inward. Just when I thought metal would fold like paper around me, the church bell rang again. Louder, sharper, commanding. The shadows recoiled, shrieking, distorting. The bell tolled a second time, and the darkness peeled away from the windows like burned film curling. Their voices retreated into static. One last whisper, Left behind. 5 towns, 5 doors, the last one is yours. Then silence. The wind died. The RV stopped shaking. The church bell fell mute. I collapsed, gasping, body trembling so violently it barely obeyed me. The engine suddenly roared back to life, without me touching the key. The dashboard flickered. The radio tuned itself. A single phrase spoke through. Almost home, Evan. Home. A word I didn't trust anymore. I didn't look back as I drove away, leaving Graveheart behind. Leaving pieces of myself behind. The road ahead was pitch black, but I knew there was one town left, one final encounter. Because whatever was hunting me, it wasn't done. And neither was I. By the time I hit the Illinois border, the road felt like a noose tightening around my journey. I wasn't choosing where to go anymore. The route chose me. The fuel gauge dictated brakes, engines faltered at the wrong times, and the sky itself seemed to turn black only when a new danger waited ahead. I didn't wonder if the 5th town existed. I feared what it meant that I was still alive to reach it. Every mile marker whispered a countdown. Every shadow stretched too far. Every reflection in the mirror felt just out of sync with my movement. Something had changed in me. Or something was trying to make me change. Even the GPS, offline for days, flickered back on, no input from me, and highlighted a direction. Crooked Hollow. Next exit, 3 miles. I nearly threw the device out the window. I tried accelerating past the off-ramp, flooring the pedal until the whole RV roared in protest, but then the engine died. Again, I coasted, helpless, and the vehicle rolled perfectly, mockingly, into the exit lane as though greeted by invisible hands guiding the wheel. The sign at the base of the ramp read, "Crooked Hollow, a place for the lost," and someone had etched violently beneath it, "and the claimed." The road narrowed between rows of tall cornstalks, their husks rattling like dry bones in a shallow grave. I didn't see a single farmhouse, no barns, no life. Just endless rows keeping secrets in silence. Then the corn broke open into a clearing. A town center built around what looked like a half-finished clock tower. Buildings leaned inward, slanted as though gravity was having second thoughts. The streetlights flickered before I even passed beneath them. My headlights caught a lone figure. A girl, maybe no older than 12, standing barefoot in the middle of the street. Nightgown soaked in dew, hair tangled around her face like roots. She didn't step toward me. She didn't speak. She just raised a chalkboard to her chest. On it, written in sloppy white scratch, "Welcome home, Evan." My heart collapsed inward. This wasn't coincidence. It was capture. I locked the doors without thinking, like that would matter. My breath fogged the windshield as the girl lowered the chalkboard, her small hand shaking as she wrote something new. She lifted it. "This is where you're from." No, I shook my head hard. I would have remembered this place, this nightmare. The girl's eyes glistened, not with tears, but with recognition, like she knew me, like she mourned me. She dropped the chalkboard. It clattered on the pavement, breaking the spell long enough for me to move again. I started the RV. It obeyed. But when I shifted to drive, the road behind me vanished. Cornfields closed like jaws. The only road now bent deeper into the town's crooked heart. I followed, not because I wanted to, but because destiny had removed my permission to choose. I crept through the warped street until I reached the center square. There, surrounding the base of the unfinished clock tower, were 4 lanterns, each identical to the ones from Sanctuary Ridge. 4 towns, 4 warnings. A 5th lantern stood unlit in the middle, waiting for me. The ground trembled. Figures emerged from every alley, doorway, window, familiar silhouettes, the pale ones from Nevada, the forest-bound watchers from Colorado, the golden-eyed congregation from Kansas, the shadow-born monstrosities from Missouri, all converging, merging nightmare with nightmare until the whole town looked like a parade of past horrors marching into the present. The girl stood nearest to me now, her voice slipping free at last. "You were supposed to stay in the first one. They get so angry when a soul doesn't follow the path." I swallowed, voice a cracked whisper. "Why me?" Her eyes lowered to the dirt. "Your name has always been on the list. Travelers alone belong here. They think you're one of them now." Before I could ask who they were, the lanterns ignited. All five, mine included. Not like the one Graveheart. This was deeper, older, metal crying as it remembered purpose. The clock tower hands twitched to life, spinning backward, time rebelling under its command. The monstrous congregation lurched forward. Not running, summoned. Something inside me snapped, something primal, raw, desperate. I grabbed the nearest heavy object, a tire iron, and smashed the RV's headlights to darkness. Then I dove into the driver's seat, slammed the locks, and whispered a shaky apology to the girl. I didn't have time to save her. I barely had time to save myself. Every creature converged, pounding, pressing, hissing, their voices layering into one. You are already ours. With shaking hands, I smashed the gear shift into drive, floored the pedal, and aimed the RV not at a road, but at the clock tower. If the center of hell has a gate, I was going to drive straight through it. Impact exploded metal, brick, and nightmares into a cyclone of dust. The lanterns burst, darkness roaring like victory. The clock tower groaned, then collapsed in a thunder of history breaking apart. Creatures screamed, peeling away like burnt film, shattering into smoke. And the girl, for a moment she smiled, a soft, grateful smile. Then she faded, like chalk washed clean by rain. The RV sputtered to a stop on the other side of the ruins. My ears rang, my vision stuttered, but I was alive. I was alone. The town was gone, erased like a drawing, crumpled and thrown away. No road, no cornfields, just open highway. My radio crackled, static soothing in its normalcy before a soft voice broke through. You paid your way out. Not many do. My chest ached with a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. And then the voice, the same girl, I swear, whispered, Don't travel alone anymore, Evan. Next time, the road might take back what you owe. The static faded. The night went quiet. For the first time in weeks, silence felt like silence, not a trap. I still live in this RV, still follow the open road. But now, I choose carefully. I camp near others. I keep my lights on. I talk to strangers so I'm not forgotten by the world. Because I learned something the hard way. The loneliest roads remember the names of those who travel alone. And isolation is the oldest predator in America. There are places not marked on maps, places with rules not printed on pamphlets, places begging for someone like you to make one wrong move. 5 towns tried to claim me. They failed. But deep inside, I know there might be a 6th, and next time, I might not be lucky enough to escape. I always thought the desert was quiet until I realized how many ways silence could twist against you. Last spring, I took my old Volkswagen Westphalia out into the Nevada high desert, planning to chase the ghosts of old mining towns I'd read about since I was a kid, places like Goldfield, Tonopah, and the half-buried settlements that never made it onto maps. I told myself it was just a solo trip for photography, to find beauty in decay, document forgotten America, the bones of the frontier. But deep down, I think I was looking for something I'd lost years ago, a kind of peace I couldn't find in the noise of cities, or maybe forgiveness for walking away from people who once mattered to me. The Volkswagen had been my companion for years. Pale blue paint faded into a soft gray under desert dust, curtains that still smelled faintly like campfire smoke, and a soft hum from the engine that always made me feel like I was in motion even when I wasn't. There's a rhythm to those old engines. They almost sound like they're breathing with you. It makes the long roads feel less empty. The highway from Beatty to Tonopah is one of those stretches where you start to feel time dissolve. The air gets sharper. The sun doesn't just shine, it presses down. Old billboards rot by the roadside, their messages faded into cryptic fragments. Turn back. Cold beer. Paradise awaits. Every now and then, I'd pass a cluster of rusting cars, campers that never made it home, trailers left where the wind could eat them. The kind of places you can't tell if someone's still living in them, or if they've just been abandoned for so long that the desert has claimed them as decor. By the time I reached Goldfield, the day had collapsed into that strange amber light that only the desert seems to know. The whole town looked like it had been paused mid-breath, wooden storefronts leaning, metal roofs shrieking softly as the wind pushed through. A sign outside one old diner still read open, though the windows were boarded shut. I parked my Volkswagen near an empty RV lot just off the main road, a patch of cracked asphalt with faded parking lines and a skeletal office trailer with its door hanging loose. No one else around, not even a stray dog. But there was something strange about the place. In the fading light, I could see faint tire tracks circling the lot, looping in perfect figure eights, fresh ones as if someone had been driving there just hours before. I killed the engine and listened. Nothing, just wine brushing against the metal siding of the abandoned office. Still, something about those tire tracks tugged at me, like they didn't belong. There hadn't been another vehicle for miles, and yet those marks looked clean, deliberate. I told myself they were old, just preserved by the dry air. I told myself a lot of things on that trip to make the silence less personal. That night, after cooking beans on my little propane stove and sitting under the brittle starlight, I noticed lights out on the horizon, two pale yellowish beams that flickered like distant headlights. The way they moved was off, too smooth, like they were gliding, not driving. At first, I thought it might be a pair of ATVs out exploring the dunes, but when I looked again, the lights were gone. I turned in early, pulling the curtains shut inside the van, listening to the Volkswagen's panels creak in the wind. I always sleep lightly when I camp alone. Every little sound registers, the hiss of sand against the glass, the way the air shifts when the temperature drops. Around midnight, I woke to a faint tapping sound outside the van. It wasn't loud, more like a fingernail against metal. Tap. Pause. Tap. I lay still, heart picking up. It could have been anything, a loose latch, a branch, an insect caught in the wind. But there were no trees and nothing loose enough to make that kind of rhythm. The sound came again, slightly lower, closer to the ground. Tap, tap, tap. I unzipped my sleeping bag just enough to peek through the curtain. The moon was high, bright enough to paint the whole lot silver. The office trailer cast a long, crooked shadow, and beyond it, movement. A figure. Small, hunched, walking along the edge of the lot. For a moment, I thought it might be another traveler, someone looking for a place to crash for the night. But then I saw how it moved. Too slow, too deliberate, like it was retracing its own steps. It stopped near the faded RV hookups and crouched beside one, touching something on the ground. I could hear the faint metallic scrape of metal against concrete. I froze, barely breathing. My van's side window reflected just enough light for me to see my own eyes staring back. When I looked again, the figure was gone. I stayed awake for hours, waiting for another sound. Nothing came. By dawn, I convinced myself I'd imagined it. Fatigue, shadows, tricks of half sleep. Still, I packed up quickly that morning, though I didn't leave town. Something in me wanted to understand what I'd seen, or thought I'd seen. I spent the next few hours exploring Goldfield's ruins. Old mine shafts yawning open in the hills, keep-out signs riddled with bullet holes, the skeletal remains of RVs left to rot under the sun. Some still had furniture inside. Tables, lamps, photographs curled from heat. One RV had writing scrawled across its door in red spray paint. "We still drive at night." That stopped me cold. The words were faded, but you could tell someone had taken their time writing them, each letter wide and deliberate. Later that afternoon, I met an old man near the gas station on the edge of town. He was sitting on a plastic chair outside the garage, polishing a wrench. Maybe in his 60s, but with that desert look, skin leathered by sun, eyes pale as bone. He nodded at my Volkswagen and said, "Those old vans still hold up better than most RVs." I laughed nervously, told him I was out exploring ghost towns. He looked at me a long time before answering. "Ain't much left out there but ghosts, son." When I asked about the old RV park, he said it used to be called Sage Flats. Closed in the early 90s after a series of accidents, gas leaks, fires, disappearances. Folks said they saw lights out there, he added, almost casually, like campfires that moved. Used to think it was tourists or miners sneaking around, but there ain't been miners there in 50 years. He stopped polishing his wrench and met my eyes. If you see those lights again, don't follow them. Don't even look too long. They say some of them lights remember faces. I didn't know how to respond, so I just nodded and thanked him for the warning. That night, I decided to camp one more time near the same RV lot. Not out of recklessness, but curiosity. Sometimes the only way to quiet a fear is to face it. When the sun dropped behind the mountains, the air turned sharp again, like metal pressed to skin. I sat in the front seat of the van, notebook open, jotting down what I'd learned, listening to the faint hum of the wind across the cracked asphalt. Then, faint at first, came that same low tapping. Tap, tap, pause, tap, and outside in the distance, 2 yellow lights flickered to life. The lights were further out this time, hovering just above the rim of the basin like low stars trembling against the night. I killed the lantern inside the van and waited, pressing my palm against the cold glass. The desert has this way of swallowing sound, but that night it felt like the air itself was listening. For a long while, nothing moved. Then the lights began to drift closer. They didn't bounce like headlights, didn't sweep or glare. They just slid across the dark, 2 faint amber orbs, tracing the same looping pattern I'd seen in the tire marks that morning. I told myself again, RVers, maybe someone out late exploring, but there was no engine noise, no crunch of gravel, no dust cloud in their wake. When the lights stopped, they sat perfectly still for nearly a minute before fading. First one, then the other. The silence that followed felt wrong. It wasn't just quiet, it was vacant, like the air had been pulled out of the world. That's when I heard the Volkswagen creak. Just a tiny shift, like something had brushed against it. I turned on the dome light. The reflection of my own face startled me, eyes wide, sweat running cold across my temples. I forced myself to open the sliding door and stepped out into the dark. The wind had picked up, pulling at my jacket, whispering through the hollow windows of the office trailer. I swept my flashlight in a slow arc. The tire marks were visible again, etched white in the moonlight, stretching toward the dunes beyond the lot. I took a breath. My better judgment said to get in the van and drive. But something else, a stubborn, restless pull, told me to follow those tracks. So I did. The ground crunched beneath my boots. The desert at night has a way of disorienting you. Distance folds in strange ways. A shape that looks close can take half an hour to reach. I followed the marks until the lot was just a shadow behind me, the Volkswagen's outline fading into the horizon like a memory. The tracks led to a low ridge overlooking what must have been the remains of an old mining pit. The air smelled faintly metallic, like rusted coins and rain that would never come. Down in the pit was an RV, or what was left of one. It was half sunk into the earth, tilted on its side, its roof caved in. Sand had swallowed most of it, but its windows still caught the moonlight, dull and milky. I climbed down carefully, flashlight cutting through the dark. Every few steps, the ground gave a hollow echo, like I was walking over empty space. When I reached the RV, I noticed something that stopped me cold. On the side panel, beneath the dust, were faint letters. Sage Flats Lot 3, the exact name the old man had said. The door hung open, bent backward, and inside it smelled of heat and iron and something faintly sweet, like rot hiding under the scent of dust. I should have turned back right then. But there was something about that interior, frozen mid-collapse, half swallowed by time, that drew me in. The seats were covered in cracked vinyl, a table still bolted to the floor, a photograph stuck to the wall by yellowed tape. It showed a family of 4 in front of an RV that looked exactly like this one. A man, a woman, 2 kids, all smiling, squinting against the sun. But something about their eyes bothered me. They were overexposed, washed white like the light had burned through their faces. As I turned the photo over, I saw a line written in shaky pen, "See you on the road again." That's when I heard the tapping. Soft at first, coming from the back of the RV. Tap, tap, pause, tap. I froze. The sound had the same rhythm as before, the same deliberate pattern. I aimed my flashlight toward the rear. The narrow hallway was filled with debris, broken dishes, a torn curtain swaying in the draft. Tap! The sound came again, this time closer. Something shifted under the wrecked bed frame, just enough for the shadow beneath it to ripple. I stumbled back, hit my shoulder against the doorway, and bolted up the slope, scrambling until my hands burned from the grit. When I reached the ridge, I turned to look back. The RV sat silent, the wind had died again, but there was a faint glow now inside the windows. Yellowish, like lamplight. I ran. By the time I saw the Volkswagen again, dawn was bleeding over the horizon. My lungs felt raw, my throat tasted like metal. I climbed into the driver's seat, turned the key, and the engine coughed awake like it had been holding its breath too. As I pulled out of Goldfield, I caught one last look in the rearview mirror. For a split second, just before the road curved away, I saw headlights in the distance. 2 pale orbs drifting through the dust, following. I didn't stop again until Tonopah, where I parked beside a diner that looked barely alive. The waitress poured me coffee without a word, her eyes flicking toward my van as if she recognized it. When I asked her about Sage Flats, she hesitated before saying softly, "That place hasn't had visitors in a long time." I asked if she knew anything about the RVs there. She shook her head but added, "They say the desert holds echoes. Sometimes what you see isn't from now, it's from then, and sometimes it's both." Her words stayed with me long after I left Tonopah. That night I camped miles south near a dry lake bed, too tired to drive farther. The stars stretched endless, the kind of sky that humbles you into silence. But as I lay there, the sound returned, the faint, rhythmic tapping against the van's metal. Only this time it was coming from inside. I shot upright, heart hammering. The van's cabin light flickered weakly before going out. My breath clouded in the air, colder than it had been moments before. Tap! I reached for my flashlight, hand trembling, and swept it across the cabin. Nothing. Just the stove, the sink, the tangle of my sleeping bag. Then I noticed the side mirror, fogged over from the inside, a handprint smudged against the glass. A child-sized hand. The air seemed to thicken, pressing down. The tapping stopped. I sat frozen, listening, waiting for something else. But there was only silence, dense, absolute. When I finally stepped outside, the desert was completely still. The moon had vanished behind a bank of clouds, and the Volkswagen stood like an island in a sea of pale dust. And out on the horizon, beyond the salt flats, those 2 faint yellow lights flickered once more. Only this time there were more behind them, 4, then 6, then a dozen, stretching across the basin in a slow, gliding procession like a caravan of phantom RVs heading nowhere. I watched them until they faded, one by one, into the black. By morning I was still shaking. I hadn't slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that small handprint on the mirror, that faint row of phantom lights fading into the horizon. I thought about leaving, just driving east until the desert fell away behind me. But something in me wouldn't let it go. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe guilt, or maybe that old instinct that drives people to stare into darkness just to prove they're still in control of what they fear. Before I knew it, I was back on the highway toward Goldfield. The town was empty again. More empty, somehow, as if the buildings themselves had shifted while I was gone. I drove past the diner, past the rusted gas pumps, until I saw the turnoff for Sage Flats Road. A sun-bleached wooden post leaned half-buried in sand, the letters carved in by hand. The closer I got to the RV park, the heavier the air felt. The hum of the Volkswagen engine seemed swallowed up by the silence around it. When I parked, I left the motor running for a minute, afraid that if I turned it off, it wouldn't start again. The tire marks were gone. Wind had erased them overnight. The whole lot looked untouched, as though no one had been there in years. But the office trailer door, it wasn't hanging anymore. It was closed. I stepped out, boots sinking into the soft dust, and approached the door. My fingers brushed the handle. It was warm. Inside, the air smelled of rust and dry paper. The small reception counter was covered in a thick layer of grit, and behind it hung a corkboard full of yellowed registration forms pinned by rusted tacks. I brushed one off and squinted at the handwriting. Lot 3, RV license 5K73, checked in, May 1994, family of 4. The edges of the paper were burned. There was a noise somewhere behind me, A low creak, the sound of shifting weight on old wood. I turned, heart pounding. The sunlight filtering through the broken blinds cut across the room in pale stripes, and for a second I thought I saw someone standing in the shadow at the far end of the hallway. Not moving, just there. I blinked, and the shadow was gone. When I stepped outside again, the wind had picked up. Sand whipped across the lot, stinging my skin. But over the howl of the gusts, I could hear it again. The tapping. Tap. Tap. Pause. Tap. This time it wasn't faint. It was close, coming from somewhere near the edge of the lot. I followed the sound toward the far row of concrete pads where RVs used to park. One pad had a square of metal grating in the center, half covered in sand. The tapping was coming from beneath it. I knelt down, brushing away the grit until I could see through the slats. Darkness yawned below, an old mine ventilation shaft, maybe. The air that drifted up from it was cold and carried that same strange sweetness I'd smelled in the sunken RV. When the tapping stopped, something else took its place. A low hum, almost like an engine idling far below. I don't know why I did it, but I grabbed my flashlight and pried open the grate. The metal screamed against the bolts, and a rush of air hissed upward like the shaft had exhaled. The tunnel below dropped into black. There were old steps cut into the rock, narrow and uneven. I climbed down. The deeper I went, the cooler it got. The walls were slick with condensation, glittering faintly in the flashlight beam. A few hundred feet in, the passage widened into a chamber, and I realized what I was standing in wasn't just a mine. It was a garage. Rows of RV parts lined the walls. Rusted generators, old license plates, shattered windows, tires stacked like ribs of some great machine. And scattered across the floor were belongings: a child's shoe, a melted lantern, a half-burned photo album, and in the center, half buried in sand, the twisted frame of another Volkswagen van. Same model as mine, same color. I stepped closer, brushing my hand against the cracked paint. The driver's door was missing, but the dashboard was still intact. And taped to the steering wheel was a scrap of paper, edges curled with heat. We still drive at night. The air shifted then, so subtle I almost missed it. A low vibration trembled through the floor, followed by a distant metallic clatter. I swung my flashlight around. On the far wall, several dark shapes glimmered faintly, like mirrors. No, not mirrors. Windows. I stepped closer, and the beam caught something impossible, reflections of headlights moving through the dark. Rows of them. Dozens. The same pale yellow lights I'd seen in the desert, gliding through some unseen landscape beyond the glass. Except when I reached out, my fingers didn't meet glass at all. The surface was soft, rippling, like light bending through water. And then a sound came from within it. Faint at first, like a radio picking up a signal. Static. Voices layered over one another. A woman laughing, a child calling, "Dad, look!" The screech of tires. I stumbled back. The flashlight flickered and died. In the dark, the tunnel seemed to come alive. I could hear engines humming, tires crunching gravel, the metallic slam of van doors opening and closing in the distance. I ran, tripping over debris, scraping my hands raw against the stone as I climbed the steps. When I burst through the grate and into the daylight, the air hit me like fire. I sprinted to the Volkswagen, slammed the door, turned the key. Nothing. I tried again. The starter clicked once, twice. Then, with a shudder, the engine caught. I floored the gas and tore down the road, sand billowing behind me like smoke. In the rearview mirror, I saw the RV park growing smaller until it vanished behind the ridge. For a few moments, I let myself believe it was over, that I'd escaped whatever that place was. But miles later, when the sun dipped and the first stars broke through, the hum returned. Soft at first, from somewhere beneath the floorboards, then a faint light flickered across the dashboard, the kind you get when another car's headlights catch your mirrors. Only there was no one behind me. The road stretched empty in both directions. Still, the reflection stayed, two yellow orbs hovering in the corner of the windshield. I tightened my grip on the wheel. The hum grew louder, blending with the engine's rhythm until I couldn't tell which was which. For a moment, I thought I saw shapes moving in the reflection, faces in the glass beside mine. A man, a woman, 2 children. Then the radio crackled to life, though I hadn't turned it on. Through the static, a voice whispered, low and broken, "See you on the road again." I slammed the dial off, heart hammering. The road ahead shimmered in the heat haze, bending like a mirage. And for one impossible instant, I saw them. A caravan of RVs and vans drifting through the desert, headlamps glowing pale gold, moving in perfect silence across the basin. And at the end of the line, a pale blue Volkswagen, dust trailing behind it like a veil. My Volkswagen. I blinked, and the vision was gone. The hum faded, the engine sound returned to normal. But when I pulled into a rest stop outside Tonopah hours later, I saw something that froze me in place. On the back window of the van, written in dust as if traced by a small hand, were 4 words. "We still drive at night." The engine ticked softly as it cooled. The desert around me was silent again, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the silence was only waiting, patient, familiar, endless. I told myself I'd sell the van when I got home, that I'd forget the lights, the tapping, the faces in the reflection. But some nights when I park in my driveway and the street is empty, I can swear I hear it again. The faint tapping against the glass, steady and soft, like knuckles brushing metal. Tap, pause, tap. And when I glance at the rearview mirror, just before the light fades, I sometimes catch the reflection of 2 faint yellow headlights gliding silently behind me, keeping pace. I used to think the desert was honest. Out there, the world isn't crowded with excuses or complicated intentions. It's raw. It strips away everything until you're left staring back at yourself. That's why I started RV camping in the first place, to clear out the noise that kept creeping into my head whenever life got too loud. But honesty can hurt, and sometimes the truth hiding out in the desert isn't the kind that keeps you warm at night. My name's Aaron. I'm 34. I grew up in Tucson, so the desert is part of me. The smell of creosote after rain, the way the horizon flickers when the heat lifts off the earth like a spirit trying to escape. I thought I understood the desert. But this trip changed everything. I took my Volkswagen RV, my pride, on a route that cuts through lands so empty most people never bother to look at a map of it. The Sonoran stretches wide and silent, broken only by the occasional gas station with a flickering sign and maybe a tired traveler with too much sun in their eyes. I was heading toward a remote campground near the Cabeza Prieta wilderness, far from crowds, far from reminders that life sometimes demands more than you want to give. I got there late, later than I planned. The sun was melting into the horizon, leaving streaks of purple like bruises on the sky. The air cooled fast, that desert trick where it steals all the heat back the moment night arrives. I parked my RV on a patch of packed earth with nothing around me but saguaros standing like tall silhouettes against the last bit of daylight. It should have felt peaceful, but instead, it felt watchful. It wasn't one specific thing, not a sound, not a figure, just this tightening in my gut like something had been waiting there all day for me to arrive. I tried to brush it off. First nights in a new place always feel strange. My dad always said, "Your instincts are smarter than you give them credit for." But I'd spent most of my adult life ignoring my instincts or rationalizing them away. So I did what I always do. I set up camp fast to outrun the unease. I stretched out a folding chair beside the RV, cooked a simple dinner, heated up chili and stale tortillas, and stared at the stars as they blinked into existence. Out there, the sky looks endless. Billions of pinpricks of light reminding you that you're a dot in a wide, dangerous universe. As darkness settled in, I heard something in the distance, a low, metallic creak. Long pause, then again, creak. It sounded like an old swing moving on its own, or a rusted sign protesting the wind. But there was no wind, and the noise was too deliberate, a rhythm that didn't fit the silence around it. My mind jumped to the campground map I'd seen. The old mining area a little over a mile away. Maybe it was just some leftover relic shifting in the cooling air. Rational, simple explanation. I held onto that idea like a lifeline and finished my meal. But the noise kept going. I turned on a lantern and the light carved a small, fragile circle around me. Everything outside that circle became darker, thicker, like the night was swallowing the edges of the world. The desert insects that usually hum and buzz and chirp, silent. No coyote calls, no rustling from lizards darting under brush, nothing. Even the saguaros seemed to be holding their breath. It wasn't until I stood up to go inside the RV that I realized something else was wrong. There were footprints in the dirt, bare feet, small, maybe the size of a child. They started near a cluster of prickly pear and led straight toward my RV door, like someone had been standing there before I arrived, watching, waiting. For a few seconds, all I did was stare. My brain refused to accept what I was seeing, because who out here would walk barefoot through cactus and scorpions and jagged rock? Who would sneak up toward my campsite and then vanish without leaving tracks going the other direction? My instinct screamed, "Get inside. Lock the door, now." I didn't hesitate. I climbed into the RV, shut the door tight, and locked it. Immediately, my breathing came shallow, like the night was pressing into my chest. I sat there in the small glow of the interior lights, trying to calm myself. My rational brain kept scrambling for explanations. Animal tracks, weird wind patterns, my imagination. I pulled up a downloaded movie on my laptop, desperate for distraction. For a few minutes it worked. I started to believe I'd overreacted, that nothing strange was happening. Then something tapped the window. One single light tap. Then two. Then a dragging sound, like fingertips trailing slowly down the glass. I froze. I couldn't even breathe. Every hair on my neck suddenly stood on end, like electricity had crawled beneath my skin. I turned off the lights. For a moment, the tapping stopped. I thought maybe whoever, whatever was out there was reacting to me. Or maybe it just needed me to listen. Then came a whisper. So small and fragile, I nearly convinced myself it was wind. Cold. Just one word, whispered from the darkness. Right outside my window, my chest tightened, my throat dried up. I couldn't move, couldn't even reach for my phone to dial for help. The tapping resumed, just a bit harder now. Tap, tap, tap. My mind flashed with images, a lost kid, a desperate survivor from some off-grid community, someone in real danger needing warmth. And yet, everything inside me insisted that opening that door would be a mistake I wouldn't walk away from. The tapping stopped again. Quiet. Too quiet. I dared to look out through a slit in the curtains. At first, I saw nothing, just pitch-black desert stretching out. Then, slowly, a shape came into focus. A thin figure standing 5 feet away, face shadowed, arms limp. Bare feet, the source of those prints in the dirt. My pulse pounded so loudly I could hear it in my ears. I blinked and the figure moved, a sudden, jerking, unnatural shift. One moment it was by the window. The next, it stood at the driver's side door. Closer, still whispering, only this time louder. Cold, let me in. Every survival instinct I ever ignored came roaring back, telling me this wasn't human. Something in its voice, not how it spoke, but how the sound felt, wrong, hollow, like someone imitating speech without understanding it. I stumbled backward until I hit the small kitchenette counter, gripping the edge so hard my knuckles ached. My heart slammed against my ribs like it was trying to escape me. I had no weapons, no plan, no idea what would happen next. Then the doorknob twitched. Once, twice. Then slowly, deliberately, it began to turn. The doorknob clicked as it turned, metal grinding against metal. Someone or something was testing the lock. Not jiggling it, not panicking. Testing. Patient. Slow. Confident that eventually I would make a mistake. I pressed my shoulder against the door without thinking, bracing it closed like a kid trying to keep a nightmare out. The knob stopped turning. Silence poured back into the RV, thick and smothering. Every second stretched too long, like time didn't want to move forward. My phone sat on the small kitchen counter. I reached for it with shaking fingers, but before I could unlock the screen, the whisper came again, this time right against the metal of the door. I'm cold. Not a request now. A complaint. Maybe even irritation. I balled my hand into a fist to keep it from trembling. I wanted to speak, to shout, to make some noise to remind myself I could still use my voice. But fear clamped down on my throat like a fist. Then it laughed. A small, broken, breathy laugh. Not joyful, mocking. The kind of laugh a child might make when pulling the wings off an insect. I stepped back, gripping the nearest thing I could find, a metal flashlight. It wasn't much, but in that moment it felt like holding on to the last piece of sanity I had left. Through the window's crack, I could barely make out the figure again, still facing the door now. But something was different. The way it stood, too stiff, too tall, like the joints were bending in reverse. It wasn't a child. It had never been a child. I shut the curtain fully, heart pounding so loud it drowned everything else out. I forced myself to breathe quietly, slowly. Any sound felt dangerous. Minutes passed, then came a new noise. Krr! Eek! That metallic groan I'd heard earlier. The one from the mining site, only now it echoed closer, much closer. It scraped at the edges of the RV like someone dragging metal claws along the exterior. I crouched low, avoiding the windows. My mind was racing. Should I start the engine and floor it? What if the headlights gave me a better look at whatever was out there? Could I even get the key into the ignition while trembling like this? The RV shifted slightly. A tiny bounce, like weight had been added to one corner. Something climbed onto the roof. The creak again. Louder. Then footsteps, soft but unmistakable, crossing from front to back, pacing, waiting. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The instinct to run, to flee, crashed against the walls of that tiny interior, now a coffin if I made the wrong move. The footsteps stopped directly above me. My phone vibrated, nearly sent me into cardiac arrest. My shaking hand pulled it from the counter. A pop-up appeared. No service. Of course, I wanted to scream. Instead, I pressed my back into a cabinet and squeezed my eyes shut. I listened, hard, a long pause, then scratching. Fingernails or claws dragging slowly across the roof. Searching, mapping, teasing. My pulse hammered so loud I could feel it in my teeth. Then, a new sound, sniffing. Something was smelling for me. It sniffed along the vents against the skylight. Then one deep exhale, hot, heavy breath, puffed through the tiny gap above the fan, blowing down the back of my neck. That broke me. I couldn't sit still any longer, couldn't wait for that thing to find a way inside. Without letting myself think, I lunged for the driver's seat, jammed the key into the ignition, and turned it so fast I nearly snapped it. The engine coughed, sputtered, too slow, my panic rising like acid. Then it roared to life. Headlights blasted forward, cutting open a slice of the desert darkness. On the hood, kneeling, was the figure. Not a child, not anything remotely human up close. Skin stretched too tight across its face, eyes hollow, mouth cracked into a wide grin like someone had carved it in with a broken bottle, bare feet gripping the metal like talons. It stared at me, head tilted, that grin widening until the cheeks split open, blood dripped onto the hood. It whispered again. Cold. I slammed the RV into drive. The creature lurched forward, hands smacking the windshield, face pressed to the glass, smiling, always smiling. I hit the gas hard and the RV jerked forward. It slid off the hood and tumbled into the headlights like a broken mannequin. For a flash, I saw its limbs bending in ways they shouldn't, bones snapping, yet it kept crawling, still smiling. I didn't look back again. The RV tore down the dirt road, wheels fishtailing, dust billowing behind me like a desperate veil. My chest heaved, sobs choking out between gasps. I didn't care where the road led. I just had to put miles between me and that thing. No more metallic creaks, no more whispers, just engine noise and the frantic beat of my heart. After what felt like hours, but was probably less than 20 minutes, I reached the paved highway. I kept driving, past the turnoff for the nearest town, past every sign that promised help. My only thought was distance. Finally, exhaustion pinned me down. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. I pulled over near a small rest stop lit by 2 flickering streetlights. Civilization, or at least something pretending to be it. I locked the doors again immediately, even though the lot was empty. Breathing slowly, trying to regain some grip on reality, I checked my phone again. 1 bar. Not much, but enough to text. I typed to my sister. Something followed me at the campground. Not human. On the highway now. Can you call me? 3 dots appeared. She was typing. Then, message failed to send. The bar disappeared. Service gone again. My hands shook so hard I dropped the phone. I leaned back, staring up through the cracked skylight. A single star blinked down at me. Everything looked normal. Too normal. Maybe I hallucinated. Maybe I fell asleep at camp and dreamed the whole thing. The logical lie crept in, comforting and poisonous. But then, a soft tap on the passenger window. My blood turned to ice. Slowly, I turned my head. There, illuminated by the weak streetlight, the same bare feet in the dirt, toes pointed toward me, and behind the glass, a reflection of that same carved grin. Pressing closer, fogging the window with each breath. The desert was silent, watching, waiting, and I realized that was only the first night. The fog on the glass pulsed with each breath it took, slow, steady, patient. I couldn't move, couldn't think. My heart felt like it might tear out of my chest and run without me. That smile pressed even harder against the window, cheek flattening against the glass. Then the figure cupped its hands around its eyes, trying to peer inside, searching for me. I sank lower into the seat, trying to make myself smaller. I knew the windows were tinted, but how well did that matter to something that wasn't supposed to exist? The creature's cracked lips parted. The whisper floated through the glass like a poison I couldn't stop breathing in. Warmer in there. No emotion, no desperation, just a statement of fact. I forced myself to silently lift my hand toward the gear shift. No sudden movements, no noise. If I could start the RV while it was distracted, it snapped its head toward my hand. A tiny motion, and it reacted instantly, like it heard my bones moving beneath the skin. It tapped one long, broken nail against the window. The scratch sounded like a warning. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. I waited for a sign, any hint that the thing had decided what came next. For a split second, time held still. Then, bright headlights exploded across the lot. A semi-truck barreled into the rest stop, rumbling like a promise of salvation. The creature's head whipped toward the light, and just like that, it was gone. Not ran away, gone, vanished, like someone cut it out of the world. I didn't question the miracle. I stomped the gas, wheels screeching against pavement, and tore out of the lot before the truck even finished parking. The driver probably saw a dusty RV flying out of there like a bat escaping hell, but I didn't slow down long enough to find out what he thought. I drove, and every mile between me and that campground felt like a breath returning to my lungs. When the sun finally began rising behind me, the desert turned gold and pink, like the nightmare belonged only to the darkness. Like daylight might make me question what I saw. But I couldn't lie to myself anymore. I needed help, perspective, answers. And I knew one place, one person to go to. Quartzsite, a tiny desert town famous for RV drifters, survivalists, conspiracy people. The kind of place where no one blinks if you start a story with, "You're going to think I'm crazy, but..." And I had an address, written on a scrap of paper taped inside one of the RV cabinets ever since I bought it. A message from the previous owner. "If anything strange happens on the road, come find me. Vince Dust Ramirez, Quartzsite AZ." I'd kept it as a joke, a quirky little piece of history taped above my spices. Now it felt like a lifeline. I reached Quartzsite just after noon. The town shimmered under the heat like it was trying to disappear. RVs that looked permanently parked. Makeshift shops selling rocks, knives, and survival gear. People wearing thousands of miles in their eyes. Finding Dust wasn't easy. But in a place like this, you ask one weird question. You get pointed in the direction of weirder people. I pulled up to a faded trailer near the edge of the desert. Old white paint peeling like burnt skin. A wind chime made of bones and rusted bolts clattered faintly above the door. I knocked. No answer. I tried again, louder this time. The wind chime clicked a bit harder. Finally, someone inside shuffled toward the door. It creaked open just enough to reveal a single eye staring back at me. Dark, wary, and too alert for someone just awakened. "You got trouble," the man rasped, not a question. "Are you Dust Ramirez?" My voice shook embarrassingly. If something followed you here, don't use names. He pushed the door wider and motioned me inside with a shaky hand. Get in, fast. I stepped in. The air smelled like diesel fuel and old coffee. Every curtain was nailed shut. Maps covered the walls, marked with red circles, desert roads, abandoned campsites, possible sightings. He locked 3 deadbolts behind us. Dust looked like he'd lived out here longer than some of the rocks. Lean, weathered, eyes sharp enough to cut glass. He studied me like a doctor diagnosing a terminal case. What'd you see? I swallowed hard. I don't know. A person, or something shaped like one. Pale. It followed me from a campsite. Bare feet? He interrupted, voice low. I nodded. He exhaled through his teeth. A curse without using words. You ever hear of the cold ones? He asked. I just stared. My silence was answer enough. He pointed at a sketch pinned to the wall. A crude drawing of a figure, skin stretched tight, mouth too wide, eyes missing. They were people once, Dust said. Desert shuts down the weak. Heat takes the body. Cold takes the soul. Sometimes the ones who die out here don't know they're dead. That thing wasn't a ghost, I whispered. No. His jaw tightened. Ghosts don't leave footprints. He poured 2 cups of bitter-smelling coffee and slid one across the tiny table to me. They want one thing. Warmth. Any warmth. A body. A place to hide from the cold that owns them now. He rubbed his arms like he felt a chill in the blistering heat. I leaned forward, hands gripping the cup as if caffeine could stitch sanity back together. How do I get rid of it? Dust's expression darkened. Once one finds you, others smell the trail. They don't give up easy. My stomach dropped through the floor. A sudden shook the trailer. Wind, or something else, dragged along the metal siding with that same metallic groan I'd heard at camp. Krr, eek. Dust stood so quickly his chair clattered over. They're here. How? How did they find me? He stared at me with a resigned sadness. You brought them. They'll follow wherever you go. The wind chime outside clattered violently, bones rattling like teeth. Dust grabbed a shotgun from behind the door, hands steady even as his eyes darted toward the boarded windows. We don't have long, he said. It's not the warm they want now. They want to make sure you don't warn anyone else. A thin shadow moved outside, gliding across the wall like a smear left by something oily and alive. Dust chambered around. They'll wait till dark to take you. That's when they're strongest. But what do I do? My voice cracked. How do I survive this? He stared into my eyes, hard, serious, unforgiving. You don't run anymore, he said. You fight. Something tapped on the window, a finger, then another, then a dozen more. Smiling voices whispered from outside the walls. Warmth, warmth, warmth. Dust stepped between me and the door. Even if we make it through tonight, you'll never be safe until they're dealt with. My throat closed. Panic grabbed at my lungs. So how do we deal with them? I asked. His answer came slow, heavy. We go back to where you found them. The campground, the mining site, the footprints. My nightmare wasn't over. It was just leading me somewhere worse. Going back to the campground felt like willingly stepping into a grave and asking the dirt to pull itself over me. Everything in my body resisted the idea, but Dust didn't give me time to argue. He grabbed 2 backpacks already packed with gear, like he had been preparing for this moment long before I ever showed up. Night vision goggles, road flares, a bundle of thick rope, a rusty metal canister labeled thermal gel, caution. I didn't ask. Dust shoved 1 backpack into my chest. Load up. We leave before sunset. I almost laughed, hysterically, because going out there during the day was terrifying enough. But nighttime, with those things? Shouldn't we wait for morning? I managed to ask, already knowing the answer from the look in his eyes. He shook his head, checking the shotgun's chamber again. They hunt strongest at night, yeah. But they hide their weakness then, too. Daylight pins them down to the earth so deep they can't touch it. At sundown, we hit them when they're climbing out. Climbing out. I tried to ignore the icy numbness spreading beneath my skin. We headed out in my Volkswagen RV, not because it was ideal, but because Dust said they were already tracking me. Might as well keep all the trouble in one box, he muttered. I didn't correct him. My home on wheels had become a lure, whether I liked it or not. I watched Quartzsite fade in the rear view. The people, the RV lots, the thin facade of normalcy, everything slipping away the closer we got to the lonely open desert again. Dust rode shotgun, eyes scanning the horizon with the kind of paranoia that isn't paranoia when the monsters are real. He held the shotgun tight against his chest. The sun was sinking lower than I wanted. The sky bleeding orange and red like someone sliced the horizon open. We reached the turnoff. Same dirt road as before, same creeping dread climbing into my nerves. You said they were people once, I whispered. What happened to them? Dust kept his eyes on the fading light. Some folks push too far from the world. Heat kills them. Cold claims them. Or they get lost and the desert decides it wants company. Is that what the mining site is? I asked. He nodded. Desert swallows places whole. That mine was built on old graves. People forgot that, but the dead didn't. We passed the exact spot where I first saw the footprints. I glanced out the window. The prints were still visible in the dust, only now there were more. Dozens. Tracking my tire marks from the night before. My skin crawled. We pulled up to the same spot I camped. I killed the engine. Dust motioned for silence. The shadows grew longer, stretching toward us like claws. He poured the thermal gel in a crooked circle around the RV. It smelled like burnt plastic and cold metal at the same time. They won't cross this when the sun hits it. Gives us a window. Small one. I swallowed. Hard. What's the plan? He handed me a long metal rod with a hook at one end. When they climb out, they're still brittle. Still cold. We keep them in surfacing stage. Drag them into the burn zone. That's the whole plan? And don't let them touch you, he added. My heart hammered against my ribs. My fingers twitched around the rod. I didn't feel like a fighter. I felt like prey someone handed a stick to and told to pretend they stood a chance. The sun kissed the edge of the horizon. Shadows deepened. The air cooled too fast. It felt unnatural. Wrong. The kind of cold you feel when a presence enters the room that isn't supposed to be there. Dust took his position on the opposite side of the circle. We stood in complete silence, waiting, listening. At first, nothing. Then came a sound that still wakes me at night, the soil shifting, ground cracking, like earth bones snapping. Something beneath us was waking up. The first pale hand broke the surface, fingers stretched too long, nails cracked and blackened, another hand. Then a shoulder, a head with no hair, just skin tight against skull. It sniffed, blind eyes searching, teeth chattering, not from cold but anticipation. Dust locked eyes with me across the circle. His nod was the signal. We moved. I hooked the rod beneath its arm and yanked with everything I had. The creature screeched, sharp, like metal slicing against bone. Dust did the same with another rising figure. The cold ones writhed, bones clicking unnaturally, trying to reform themselves as they emerged. Their skin wasn't pale. It was clear, frosted, like their blood had turned to ice. Dust shouted, "Get them in the line! Quick!" I dragged the first creature into the gel ring. The second, both of its feet touched the chemical. It convulsed violently, screams warping into unhuman shrieks. Smoke curled upward from its legs, its skin cracked like porcelain. Then its body collapsed into dust. I stared, stunned. Relief almost surged up until I heard the others. Dozens of them now. No. Hundreds. Hands, heads, entire torsos clawing upward out of the cursed earth. Faces twisted in agony and hunger. Mouths wide with that carved grin. Dust fired a shot into one's skull, frost and bone exploding across the dirt. But for every one we dragged into the burn zone, 4 more rose. They surrounded us from every direction, thin bodies crawling spider-like, teeth chattering, voices whispering in unison. Warmth, warmth, warmth. They pressed against the gel boundary, shrieking when their fingers brushed it, but learning. Testing new paths. Their intelligence wasn't gone. It was focused entirely on us, on me. Dust fired again. Shells clinked onto frozen dirt. "We gotta go," he roared. "Now!" I dropped the rod, sprinted for the door. Dust covered me, reloading on the run. We dove inside the RV, slamming the lock just as the shadows surged around us. The windows fogged instantly with breath. Hands slapped against the glass. Faces pressed in, that same monstrous grin etched on each one. Dust shouted, "Drive!" Go! My hands shook violently on the wheel, but adrenaline did what fear couldn't. I started the engine and floored it. The RV lurched forward, tires spitting dust everywhere. Cold bodies clung to the windows, nails scraping across the glass. The RV swayed under their weight. I kept driving, knuckles bone white, praying the doors would hold. I saw them in the headlights, hundreds sprinting alongside us, their limbs bending like liquid, keeping pace. Dust threw open the side window and fired into the mass. Screams exploded from the impacts, but they didn't slow. They're gaining, Dust yelled. I slammed the gas harder. The engine screeched in protest. We were racing the darkness itself now. Ahead, a flash of light. Not headlights. The sun, just starting to rise. Dust grabbed my shoulder. Punch it. They can't survive the dawn. I did. The RV roared forward. The first ray of sunlight hit the nearest cold one, and its skin ignited like dry leaves catching flame. It crumbled mid-stride. The others shrieked, falling, scrambling back toward the folding earth. By the time we hit the paved road again, the desert behind us was silent. No whispers. No tapping. Nothing. Dust leaned back, chest rising and falling hard, shotgun still clutched in his hands. We bought time, he said quietly. Not victory. Not safety. Just time. I stared out the windshield at the growing light, burning away the night's horrors like they never existed. But we knew better. Dust turned to me. You listen close now, he said. Killing them bought us daylight, but the trail stays warm for a long time. What does that mean? I whispered. He locked his eyes with mine. It means they will come again. They will come again. Dust's words hung in the air like smoke that refused to dissipate. My hands were still locked onto the steering wheel, even though we were already miles from the mine. The rising sun cast rays across the fading highway. Warm, but not comforting. Not anymore. We pulled off into another lonely corner of the desert, this one flat, open, no rocks or brush where anything could hide. Dust insisted. Visibility. Always know what's coming. I stepped out first. The sunlight felt wrong on my skin, like heat couldn't chase out the chill carved into my bones. Dust checked the perimeter, scanning every grain of sand for movement, every shift in the light for shapes that shouldn't exist. He pointed to the hood of the RV. Sit. I did. My legs wobbled, but the metal beneath me was solid, unmoving. Dust leaned against the bumper, shotgun resting against his shoulder like an extension of his body. Saw your fear, he said quietly. That's good. Fear's how you know you're alive. I stared at him. How long have you been fighting them? He didn't answer at first. He just wiped sweat from his brow, even though the chill still clung to the air. Ever since I survived the mine collapse, he said. Should have died with the others. But the desert doesn't take who it wants all at once. It marks you, lets you walk, makes you a witness. He looked older suddenly, not physically, something deeper. Like years had been pulled out of him grain by grain. You said they'll follow me, I whispered. How far? How long? As long as it takes, Dust said, until you break or you give up or they drag you into the earth to join them. My throat tightened. I don't want that. A humorless chuckle escaped him. No one does. We sat in silence a moment. The desert wind pushed a thin sheet of sand across the asphalt, like nature trying to cover up the road. Then Dust looked at me, eyes sharp again, determined. But you got something most folks don't, he said. You saw them and survived. Twice. Luck, I said. Instinct, he corrected. And instinct is what they hate, because it's the last warmth a person keeps. The words hit me deeper than he intended. I had been running from everything for months. From the life I left behind, from the person I failed to become. My instincts had been trying to tell me something long before I ever reached the campground. But real terror, it cuts through denial. Dust slapped a fresh shell into the shotgun. They'll burrow deep today. But tonight? They'll test you again, and every night after. I almost asked why he stayed here. Why he didn't run far away from this cursed stretch of sand and bone. But before I opened my mouth, he answered anyway, reading my thoughts. Someone has to keep the trail warm for them, he said. Better it be me than some family in a rental RV. His smile was tired, broken, brave, and I realized why he'd taped that note inside the cabinet. He wasn't warning anyone. He was waiting for someone else who'd seen them. The burden was too big for one man. He put a hand on my shoulder. Firm, grounding. You leave. Go far. North if you can. Cold up there ain't theirs. But listen. His eyes pinned mine with a severity that froze the air between us. Don't ever camp alone again. I nodded. I didn't trust myself to speak. He stepped back, giving me a final look. Sun's climbing. You should too. I turned toward the driver's door. Hand on the handle. Almost safe. Then Dust called out, sharply. Aaron. I looked back. He held something out toward me. A strip of old leather, burned at the edges, a single metal charm dangling from it, shaped like a sun, rusted, ancient. They hate light that isn't theirs, Dust said. Wear this, and you might buy a few seconds when it matters most. My fingers closed around the charm, heavy, cold, a reality I could hold on to. Dust nodded once, then turned and walked away, not into town, not toward shelter, but deeper into the desert, shotgun ready, steps deliberate. He was going home, not a place, a purpose. I climbed into the RV, started the engine, and drove, not fast, not frantic, just forward. The desert slipped by like a tired dream ready to collapse into morning. Hours passed, the sun climbed high, the world looked normal again. I found a gas station. Diesel pumps, sun-faded signs, a couple tourists buying snacks. Ordinary. Beautifully ordinary. I parked far from the building, stepping out slowly like someone learning gravity again. The warmth of the sun heated my skin. No chill. No whispers. Maybe we did buy time. Inside, I bought food. Water. A map that stretched far north. When I returned to the RV, I hesitated at the door. Dust's words echoed in my head. Fear's how you know you're alive. I looked at the passenger seat, a place Dust once sat, a place now empty. A reminder that courage sometimes looks like a man who never stops fighting. I buckled up, adjusted my grip on the wheel, and took a long breath. Then a soft thump on the roof. My heart seized. Another thump, like something landing lightly, perfectly balanced, slow scratching above me, like nails dragging across metal. I didn't need to look. I didn't need proof. I put the RV into drive. The desert didn't answer, but the roof did. Tap, 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 tap. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The sun charm around my neck warmed, faintly. Warning or promise, I couldn't tell. I gripped the wheel, knuckles white. My voice found strength I thought fear had stolen. You'll have to catch me in daylight. The tires spun. Gravel flew. I drove north. Away from the place where the dead don't remember they died. Away from the mine where cold fingers still scrape for warmth. But the tapping stayed just behind me, persistent, patient, alive. Because the desert does not forget, and neither will I. I don't know what it was that drew me to the Appalachians that autumn. Maybe the quiet, maybe the guilt I was trying to silence. I'd been driving my old Volkswagen camper for weeks, threading through back roads that seemed to shift behind me like they didn't want to be remembered. The leaves were turning, the air was brittle, and the low ridgelines rolled like sleeping bodies beneath a pale sky. I told myself I just needed a break, that I was chasing solitude. But if I'm being honest, it felt like I was being led. It started with a map I found at a gas station in Southern Virginia, one of those faded, laminated maps locals pinned to the corkboard behind the register. It had hand-drawn stars marking good campsites, but one stood out, a scribbled note next to a star in the middle of nowhere. Ask for Hillview Park, cash only. I don't know why I fixated on it. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe I was tired of the main highways, the noise, the fake smiles of polished campgrounds. Either way, I followed the directions written on that map, winding through hollowed-out valleys where radio signals vanished and houses looked long abandoned. By dusk, I found it. Hillview RV Park, if you could call it that. There was no sign, no gate, no check-in office, just a narrow gravel drive that branched off the road like a scar cutting through skeletal pines. My headlights caught the glint of something metallic, an old mailbox, its numbers half peeled away. 1923. Beneath it, someone had taped a yellow envelope. Inside was a paper note, folded neatly, written in looping cursive. Pick a spot, $20 a night, leave cash in the box. No name, no phone number. I don't know why, but I wasn't scared, not yet. There was something about the simplicity of it, almost comforting, like an honesty you don't see anymore. So I eased the Volkswagen down the gravel, feeling the stones grind beneath the tires, the world narrowing around me. The air smelled like wet bark and cold smoke. Through the thinning light, I could make out a dozen or so RVs scattered through the clearing. Some new, some ancient. One or two half collapsed like their owners had just vanished mid-trip. When I stepped out, the first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the kind you find in peaceful places. This was heavier, denser. The kind that pressed against your ears until you felt your own heartbeat in your skull. Somewhere off in the trees, a dog barked once, then stopped. I parked near the far edge of the lot, close to the tree line. I remember running my hand over the Volkswagen's chipped blue paint, like I was grounding myself to something real. I cooked a small dinner on the stove, canned beans and coffee, and sat outside, watching the last threads of daylight die behind the hills. That's when I saw the first strange thing. There was another camper, maybe 60 yards away, an old Winnebago, parked crooked, its blinds drawn, no light inside. But every few minutes I thought I saw movement in one of the windows. Not clear movement, just the shifting of a shape, like someone pacing slowly back and forth. I waved once, hoping for a neighborly wave back. Nothing. By the time night settled in, the mist had rolled down from the ridges. It gathered low, thick, like it wanted to crawl into the Volkswagen itself. I tried to distract myself, played a podcast, scrolled through old photos, but I couldn't shake the sense that something about this place was wrong. The air felt charged, like before a thunderstorm, but there wasn't a cloud in sight. Then came the sound. It started faintly, a low knocking, somewhere outside, 3 slow taps, then silence. I thought maybe it was the metal awning of the RV flexing in the cold, but then it came again. Knock. 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 This time it was closer. I froze, every muscle tight. The Volkswagen was old, the kind with sliding doors that never sealed right. The idea that someone could be standing just inches away, hidden by the dark, made my skin crawl. I killed the lights, waited. The mist pressed close to the windows. I swear I could hear breathing. Not loud, but rhythmic, like the way you hear your own breath when you've been running. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The silence came roaring back. I didn't sleep that night. I kept the flashlight in my hand until dawn, watching the inside of the van slowly lighten with the morning. When I finally stepped out, the fog was gone, burned away by pale sunlight. The other RVs looked still and harmless again. I told myself it had to have been my imagination. Maybe a branch tapping the metal or an animal passing by. But when I looked down near my back tire, I saw something that made my stomach drop. Footprints. Bare ones. Small, like a child's. They led from the woods to my van and stopped just beneath the window. I followed them back a few feet, but they disappeared at the tree line, swallowed by wet leaves. I remember calling out, "Hello," half hoping, half terrified someone would answer. The forest just swallowed my voice. The rest of the day, I tried to shake it off. I even thought about packing up, but pride kept me there. I told myself this was what I came for: solitude, adventure, the raw truth of the road. So, I stayed. Around noon, I walked down the hill to see if I could find the park's owner, maybe pay the $20 and ask about the other campers. That's when I met her. She was sitting outside a small trailer near the center of the clearing, an older woman with thin gray hair, smoking a cigarette like it was keeping her alive. She didn't seem surprised to see me. "Volkswagen, right?" she said. "We don't get many of those anymore." I nodded, asked if she ran the place. "Used to," she said. "These days, it just runs itself." When I tried to hand her the cash, she shook her head. "Keep it. Won't matter much." I laughed awkwardly, waiting for her to explain. She didn't, just looked at me with this faint, almost pitying smile. Then she said something that stuck in my chest like a nail. "Don't go walking after dark. The hills here keep what they like." Before I could ask what she meant, she turned and went inside her trailer, locking the door behind her. That afternoon, I drove out to the nearest town. just 10 miles down the road, to stock up on supplies. But when I told the cashier where I was camping, his face changed. He didn't say much, just, "That place ain't open no more." When I pressed, he just shook his head and muttered, "Ain't been since 19." I thought he meant the pandemic, but when I asked what happened, he just said, "People went missing. They never found them." On the drive back, I noticed something strange. The road I'd taken that morning didn't look the same. The turns felt sharper, the distance shorter, and when I finally reached the clearing again, I realized something else. The old Winnebago was gone, completely. No tire marks, no trace it had ever been there. That night, the knocking came back. But this time, it wasn't at my door. It was coming from inside the woods, dozens of knocks echoing in uneven patterns, sometimes 3, sometimes 5, sometimes just one, long drag like someone scraping a stick across bark. I stood by the window, staring into the dark, trying to make sense of it. The rhythm wasn't random. It felt deliberate, like language. And underneath it, I swear I heard voices, low, murmuring, almost rhythmic, the same cadence as prayer or pleading. I should have left right then. Every nerve in my body was telling me to, but I didn't. It's strange what pride does when fear begins to whisper instead of scream. It convinces you that you're still in control. That logic can explain anything if you just wait long enough. I told myself it was locals messing around or echo from the valley. I told myself everything except the truth. I was terrified. I stayed up all night again, the Volkswagen rocking slightly in the wind that didn't exist. The forest beyond the glass was nothing but black, a kind of black that feels alive, like something staring back at you. Every few hours, the knocking would start again, further away now, fading deeper into the trees as if whatever it was moving on to someone else. By dawn, my eyes were sandpaper. The world outside looked too bright, too calm, a kind of peace that felt false. I decided to walk the perimeter of the campground, maybe find where the other RVs had gone. I counted 7 the first night. That morning, I could only find 4. The grass around their tires was high, undisturbed, like they hadn't moved in weeks. But the one nearest me, a small white trailer, had its door wide open. Inside was a folding chair, a plate of half-eaten food, and a coffee mug, still stained with the ring of something recent. I called out, stepped closer, and noticed something carved into the inside of the door. At first it looked like scratches, but when I ran my fingers over it, I realized it was writing. Crude, but deliberate. "Don't answer." I backed away, heart hammering. I wanted to ask, "Don't answer what?" But a part of me already knew. I walked back to my van and decided I needed to talk to that woman again, the one who told me the hills keep what they like. Her trailer looked the same from the outside, curtains drawn, smoke rising from the rusted stovepipe. But when I knocked, there was no answer. I circled around the back, saw a single chair overturned in the dirt. The door was unlocked this time. Inside, it looked abandoned. The bed was made, the ashtray empty, everything too neat, too staged. Except on the table, a small tape recorder and a stack of old Polaroids bound with a rubber band. I hesitated, then pressed play. At first, all I heard was static. Then a voice, the woman's, low, shaking. "They don't come from the hills. They are the hills. They move like fog. They sound like people you miss. Don't listen. If you answer, you're theirs." Then static again. A long silence. Then 3 faint knocks, right there on the recording. I turned it off and stepped back, chills crawling up my neck. I took one of the Polaroids from the stack. It showed a man standing in front of a Volkswagen like mine, same paint, same model, smiling at the camera. On the back was a date, 2019. There were more photos, families, couples, solo travelers, always in front of the same backdrop, those same hills. The last one made my blood run cold. It was taken at night, the flash catching something behind a camper window. A shape, too tall, too thin, its face lost in glare, but its hand pressed flat against the glass. The photo shook in my hand as I realized the camper in that picture was parked exactly where mine was now. I left the trailer and stumbled back into the clearing. The light had changed, that weird golden haze that only happens before a storm. except there was no wind, no thunder, just that thick metallic taste in the air like the world was holding its breath. That's when I saw him. A man standing at the edge of the woods about 50 yards away. He was facing me, motionless, his clothes old and dust-colored. Something about him looked wrong, like he was part of the landscape, the lines of his body too straight, too still. I shouted, "Hey, you okay?" He didn't move. I took a few steps forward, keeping my eyes locked on him. He didn't blink, didn't breathe. Then I realized something else. The ground beneath him wasn't quite right. It looked sunken, soft, like he was standing in it up to his ankles. I stopped. The world seemed to tilt slightly, a low vibration humming through the soil. And then, without warning, he was gone. Not turned, not walked, just gone, like he'd been pulled backward into the air. The forest went dead silent again. I ran back to my Volkswagen and slammed the door, locking it out of instinct. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely turn the key, but when I did, the engine sputtered and died. Again and again. The radio flickered on, even though I hadn't touched it, and a voice crackled through, warped by static. A woman's voice. "Don't answer them." Then the knocking started again. This time from the back of the van. I turned around, flashlight trembling in my grip, and saw the window fogging over from the outside. A handprint appeared, small, child-sized, just like the footprints I'd seen. I whispered to myself, it's not real, over and over, but the knocking didn't stop. It grew faster, more frantic, until it was like a dozen hands pounding all around the van. Roof, doors, windows, a storm of fists and breath I couldn't see. Then, silence, the kind of silence that feels after. Like something had finished deciding. I must have blacked out for a while. When I came to, sunlight was streaming through the windshield. My phone read 9:13 a.m. Everything was still. No prints, no marks. The forest looked normal again, casual, harmless. I drove out of Hillview without looking back. I didn't even stop for gas until I was 50 miles out, shaking so bad I spilled coffee all over my lap at the first diner I found. The waitress asked if I was okay, and I almost laughed. I tried to find Hillview on Google Maps that night. Nothing. No listing, no satellite images, no trace of the road I'd taken. Even when I zoomed into where I thought it should be, all I found was green, uninterrupted forest. That should have been the end of it. But 2 days later, while parked at another campsite in West Virginia, I found something wedged behind my seat. A Polaroid. The same kind the woman had. It showed my van. Same paint, same license plate, parked in Hillview, except this one was dated 2 days ago. I stared at that photo for hours, tracing the background. The trees looked wrong, taller, more skeletal, and in the corner of the frame, barely visible, was a blur of something pale, a shape just behind the Volkswagen's rear window. That night I dreamt of knocking, not outside, but beneath me, coming from under the van. When I woke, the Polaroid was gone. By the time I reached the next town, I'd convinced myself I was having some kind of breakdown. I stopped at a small bar along the highway, hoping for normal conversation, anything to anchor me back to reality. I got talking to an older man at the counter, a retired trucker, the kind who collects stories like badges. When I mentioned Hillview, his face changed. Not fear exactly, recognition. "Thought they shut that down years ago," he said. My buddy used to haul propane tanks out that way, swore the forest moved on its own. I told him what I'd seen, the knocking, the disappearances, the woman's warning. He just nodded slowly, as if I'd confirmed something he'd already decided was true. Then he said, quietly, "They say the park was built on an old family plot, land that got sold when the mine shut down. Some of those miners never left the ground. Maybe they don't like company." He raised his glass like a toast, eyes on the window where the rain had just started to fall. "You hear knocks out there," he said. "You don't answer. You pray they keep walking." I left the bar that night with his words still echoing in my head. You don't answer. You pray they keep walking. But the thing about fear is that it doesn't stop when you leave the place that birthed it. It follows you. It lingers like smoke on your clothes. Every time I shut my eyes, I heard the rhythm of those knocks somewhere in the distance. Sometimes faint, sometimes inside my skull. For days, I tried to drown it out with movement. I drove west, staying off interstates, keeping to forgotten routes that wound between dark ridgelines and empty hollows. The Volkswagen rattled and hummed like an old animal trying to shake something off its back. But every night, no matter how far I drove, I felt it again. That pressure in the air, that faint hum in the ground beneath the tires. I started noticing patterns, road signs that reappeared miles apart but looked identical. Gas stations where the pumps were running but no one was inside. Faces in passing cars that looked familiar, like I'd seen them parked at Hillview. The world felt thin, as if I'd stepped sideways into a version of the Appalachians that only existed for those who'd seen too much. On the fourth night, exhaustion finally won. I pulled into a rest area near an overlook. It wasn't much, a picnic table, a single streetlight buzzing like a trapped fly. The view looked out over an endless sprawl of dark hills. I parked, cut the engine, and sat there, letting the night fold around me. The fog was moving again, rolling low over the road in waves. That's when I noticed something taped to the inside of the windshield. A note. I swear it hadn't been there before. It was the same yellow paper from Hillview, same looping handwriting. Pick a spot. My breath caught. I opened the door, looked around. No other vehicles, no sound but the wind. Yet the fog was thicker now, coiling up from the valley like it had intent. I backed into the van and shut the door, every instinct screaming drive, but the engine wouldn't turn over. Not even a click. For a long moment, I just sat there in the dark, shaking. Then I heard it again. Knock, knock, knock. Not on the glass this time. On the ground, right beneath the van. I turned on my phone flashlight, the beam trembling as I aimed it at the floorboard. The sound moved with it, from under the front tires to the back, pacing. Then another sound joined it, whispering, so soft I thought it was wind slipping through the vents. But it wasn't random. It was words. My name, over and over, from every direction. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles cracked. I started praying, not because I'm religious, but because words were all I had left. And then I remembered the trucker's words. You don't answer. So I didn't. I just sat there, breathing through my teeth while the knocking grew violent, shaking the whole van until the dishes rattled and the mirrors quivered. Then, one last heavy slam beneath the floor, and everything stopped. The next thing I remember, it was morning. The light was wrong again. Pale, colorless. My head felt full of static. When I stepped out, the pavement around the Volkswagen was covered in small, wet footprints. Dozens of them, circling the van in a perfect ring. I don't remember leaving the overlook. I just remember driving. Days blurred, the forest pressed closer. Every time I stopped, I felt eyes in the dark. Not human, not animal, something older, patient, something that remembered. Somewhere near the Tennessee border, I found another campsite. Real this time. People, laughter, a campfire crackling. For the first time in weeks, I felt almost normal. A man around my age waved me over, offered a beer, and asked where I'd been traveling. I almost didn't answer. But I was so tired of holding it in that the story just spilled out. Hillview, the knocks, the photos. When I finished, the man was quiet. Then he said, "That's strange. You said Hillview? My cousin's van went missing there in 2019. Same kind you've got, blue Volkswagen." He went to his tent and came back with his phone, scrolled for a second, then showed me a photo. A smiling man in front of a Volkswagen, standing in the sun. The same photo I'd seen in the woman's trailer. He looked at me. "You knew him?" I couldn't speak. My throat closed up. I stared at that photo, at the curve of the hills behind him, at the faded lettering on the van's side, and then my stomach dropped. Because parked right behind him, half hidden by trees, was another Volkswagen. Mine. I left that campground before sunrise. I didn't stop again for days. Every time I looked in the mirror, I swore the trees were moving in sync with me, bending closer as if they were listening. The knocking still comes sometimes, faint somewhere deep beneath the wheels, but I've learned not to answer. It's been a year now. I don't camp much anymore. I park mostly near towns, motels, places with street lights and sound, But sometimes late at night when I'm alone in the van, I still feel it. That low vibration beneath the floor, like something keeping pace just beneath the road. I've started thinking about the people who vanished. Maybe they didn't all die. Maybe some of them got taken into whatever that place was, absorbed by it. Maybe that's what the hills do. They remember the lost, make them part of themselves. Sometimes, when fog rolls down the ridges and the world goes quiet, I think about that woman's voice on the tape. They sound like people you miss. That line haunts me more than anything, because I think I understand it now. Fear doesn't always come as a monster or a shadow in the woods. Sometimes it comes as a memory, as a voice you trust, calling from just outside the light. The last time I heard the knocking was 3 nights ago, just before dawn. It came soft this time, hesitant, almost gentle, and then, through the thin metal of the van, I heard a whisper I hadn't heard in years. "Hey, kiddo, open up. It's me." It was my father's voice. He died in 2018. I sat there, frozen, the air thick with the smell of wet leaves and rust. Tears filled my eyes before I even realized I was crying. My hand moved toward the door handle, slow, automatic, like muscle memory. Then something in me snapped, a surge of cold clarity. I whispered back, "I can't." The knocking stopped. When I stepped outside later, the fog was gone, the hills still. But the dirt beside the van was marked with prints again, not bare this time, but boot prints, the kind my father used to wear when he took me camping. They led to the woods and vanished into the trees. I stood there for a long time, just listening. The forest sounded like it was breathing. Maybe the old woman was right. The hills keep what they like. Maybe they keep the lonely, the grieving, the ones who stay too long listening for something that isn't supposed to speak back. But maybe there's another truth buried in it too. Something quieter. Maybe those who go missing never really leave. Maybe they become part of the land, folded into the fog, watching the rest of us keep moving. Sometimes I still hear faint knocking when I drive through the mountains, soft, steady, like an old heartbeat in the bones of the earth. I don't answer anymore. I just keep driving, watching the ridges roll by in the rearview mirror, fading into that endless blue haze that hides everything we can't understand. And sometimes, when the radio cuts to static, I swear I can still hear her voice, that woman from Hillview, whispering through the static like she's somewhere close, still warning whoever will listen. Don't go walking after dark. The hills here keep what they like.